So here we are, and I give you the king of all kaiju, the Duke of Destruction, and finally, I hear you say. And yes, I did put extra time into this one as I did want it to be the most definitive look at the latest incarnation of a character that so many people adore. It's just what the character deserves. But before I do, let me just tell you about a few of the other GSP videos that I've got coming up on the channel. I've got a video devoted to GSP Mothra and Meganulon, one about GSP MECHAGODZILLA and what we can expect from that, the Alapu Upala song explained, 5 monsters I want to see in GSP Season 2, 10 references in GSP, is GSP the start of a Godzilla multiverse, and creatures of GSP ranked, for which I want your feedback in a poll I'm going to put out there in a couple of days. So get subscribed if you're like me and you cannot get enough of GSP, or you generally like chatting shit about sci-fi and mecha and kaiju shenanigans. As we all know by now, GSP's take on the fabled Godzilla character is a divisive one which took Shin Godzilla as a blueprint, in that the character is once again treated as a mysterious and massively powerful destructor, sent to teach humanity some fucking humility after they start experimenting with forces they barely comprehend. Here's looking at you, Ashihara. At least, that's my theory of what's going on here. I could be wrong. Also, like Shin, this Godzilla gradually progresses through multiple evolutions before reaching its fearsome, most powerful final form. But in the forms leading up to this, Toho and Studio Ghibli's Eiji Yamamori took some pretty radical steps with the character design, incorporating elements of other monsters. In my mind, Godzilla's evolution generally follows the theory that life came out of the oceans, gradually developing into fish, then fish developed legs and crawled up onto land, then cocooned itself in some kind of black rock, and then fought a mammoth sea serpent. You know what I mean! So before we even see Godzilla, we hear of a legend local to the residents of the fictional city of Nagashio, where the GSP story first starts out. It prophesies that when the seas turn red, the monster known as Gojira would rise and bring an end to the world. Oh, check it out, the rodents have got little suits and little hats on. I think it even said somewhere that it could end the entire universe. But I can't find that reference right now, so don't quote me. Now, already you have to question where this legend came from. It's far too specific to just be random folklore. Later, we find out that there was another Godzilla attack before the Second World War, which we'll come back to. But whether that was the inspiration for this legend, or whether the legend is even older, we will have to wait to find out. Technically speaking, the first time we see Godzilla is at the end of the first episode, in the basement of a military facility, as a long, dead skeleton. But we'll come back to that later. Godzilla's first form as a living, breathing monster is this. Godzilla Aquatilis had a lot of people scratching their heads. I have much confusion, but also head life. If it wasn't for the Godzilla theme tune playing over his first appearance, many wouldn't have recognized it as Godzilla at all. Firstly, it's a fully aquatic version of Godzilla. The overall body shape resembles a mosasaur, with a snake-like head and a huge jaw mandible attached to this massive body with a large, oversized belly.
Nothing wrong with being a lovely, plumpy, humpy dumpty.
The fuck? What you keep saying that for?
It's just something my mama used to say. Ooh,
look at my lovely, fluffy, happy dumpty. You want a donut? You don't have a mother. You come from the fucking back of my fucking mind.
Why do you think I ate so much?
Now, despite its large size, this guy's a very fast swimmer, being clocked at 50 knots, which is about 60 miles per hour, which is just under 100 kilometers an hour. According to this naval officer right here, it can even reach 80 knots, which is 90 miles an hour, or 144 kilometers, and that is fast. That's like speedboat fast. Wait, I gotta see that again. Wait, let's do this. We get a beat out of this guy. Wait, don't focus! If you get caught driving a car that fast, you in trouble, boy! And I know that because it happened to me. Whereas most of a fish's forward momentum is generated by its tail fin, a mosasaurus or a plesiosaur have more of a regular tail, and these have large pectoral fins that not only help with maneuverability, like they would on any fish, but also give it its forward motion. And the same applies to Aquatilis, that has these huge side fins with 3 or 4 spikes on each side. Also, like a Mesosaurus, it has a rear set of pectoral fins, which will of course become its hind legs in its next form. But Aquatilis has the best of both worlds here in this respect, as it also has a tail that can fan out. Fuck it, I gotta do it. It's gotta be done. I'm sorry. Interestingly enough, there's also this running down the side of Aquatilis' body, which is very similar to this, which runs down the side of our favourite sea serpent Manda. Check out my video on him if you haven't already. And I love this about Singular Point, about how, as with the tail we see on the first Rodan we see in JSP, there are these little touches that link the creatures and hint to their shared genealogy. These fins on the top of his head and the sides of his jaw here really remind me of Titanosaurus, as does this armored belly, and these orange highlights in certain areas of his body. But the largest similarity to me is that tail that I mentioned, which can fan out and give even more thrust through the water. Now, we can't really talk about GSP Godzilla without talking about archetype, as in this series the two things go hand in hand. I did a whole video on archetype and I'll put the link below if you want to know more about that. But for now, let's just say that one way of looking at it is that if we as humans are made up of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, etc., then the creatures are made up of different forms of archetype. That's my latest theory. Anyway, the creatures of GSP, Bar, Anguirus, and Kumonga seem to need it to live in and spread it wherever they go, seemingly terraforming our planet. And the biggest spreader of this mysterious red dust is the G-Man, as you can see here. Anyway, Aquatilus follows Samanda toward land where there's a brief tussle before he assumes his second form, and that's the form of Godzilla Amphibia. And dear lord, this is no looker. In this pose right here, it looks like it's down on all fours about to yak up in a toilet after a heavy night of drinking. But you can see how the fins have developed a joint right here that serves as a kind of wrist for it to spread its weight over its newly developed foot. The rear legs look like these floppy, disgusting... Like imagine a zombie that's had its legs crushed and now just drags itself around by its arms, and well, I'm just not a great fan of Amphibia. The head, inspired by Varan, looks pretty cool, but I find the body unbalanced and unwieldy, and I'm not crazy about this double and triple chin right here, which admittedly is more obvious in the artwork than it is in the show itself. He now has knobbly skin, also like Varan, and here's where we first really see these tusks, which don't point straight down like his other teeth, but kind of jut out to the sides. Aquatilus had these too, but they were much further back. It's only here that they really start to resemble the mainstay that they become throughout the evolutions. Amphibia is able to blast out a cloud of freezing vapor at a temperature of -20 degrees, which is ignited by the military and causes a huge explosion. It's kind of bizarre, right? Have you ever heard of something that cold that's flammable? Anyway, when the dust settles, we see that Godzilla is encased in a black crystalline cocoon, which of course enables him to progress to his next evolution, a form even better suited to life on land, and that is Godzilla Terrestrius. And I am much happier with this design, probably because it's gradually getting closer to the creature we all want to see. It's finally up on its hind legs, kind of hunched over like a T-Rex would be, and it's here that we see a small demonstration of its atomic breath power. Interestingly, in GSP, his dorsal plates light up from head to tail, whereas normally it lights up the other way around, from tail to head. Anyway, the main talking point about Terrestrius is his ability to form tendrils with his blood. And yes, after the military hit him with a missile which clearly wounds him, 3 tendrils shoot out of his wound to wrap around the second missile and snuff it out before he rapidly heals. He also pukes up a bunch of blood at one point, and it's been theorized that this is either leftover archetype from his cocooning and evolution, or he's just eaten some undercooked wings and he's got a nasty bout of salmonella. Either way, it's pretty fucking disgusting.
Not if you're into that kind of thing.
It's in this form that we finally see him unleash his atomic breath, and as I mentioned before, he has these rings that appear around his mouth that he can seemingly fire off like a projectile and shred any giant rodents that have stepped out of line. He also sends out an enormous cloud of archetype, one which looks like, if it was left unchecked, it would soon smother the entire continent in red dust. Next up is the head honcho, and the evolutionary form that we've all been waiting for, and it does not disappoint. Well, it didn't disappoint me anyway. I've seen a number of vids bashing this design, but I've gone from, I quite like it, to, damn, I really like this design. He's much bulkier now, with much of his mass being in his massive tree trunk-like legs, as well as this enormous tail, which will definitely give him a low center of gravity, meaning that it would almost be impossible for an opponent to knock him over. He still walks kind of hunched over, as opposed to the Showa era stuff where he was like more upright. The side tusks are here, as well as the multiple rows of teeth that are noticeable on all of the GSP creatures. This guy also has 3 pipes at the back of his throat, much like certain snakes have, and although we don't know exactly what they're for, it's pretty safe to assume that it's something to do with the atomic breath. Speaking of which, the atomic breath also evolves here too. Now it can shoot out like a beam as well, one that, like in Shin Godzilla, is much more focused than what we see in the monsterverse, for example. One that's so powerful that it can cut down skyscrapers in seconds, cutting through concrete and melting metal like it was ice cream under a magnifying glass. And it begs the question, how far could this beam actually go? Because it looks like pretty fucking far. Now, unfortunately, we don't get a chance to find out exactly how powerful Godzilla actually is in GSP, as he just doesn't have much in the way of competition. He's so much more powerful than anything he comes up against. He minces Rodan with one breath, he slices the Manda in half with one go, and even in the climactic fight, the biggest version of Jet Jaguar really doesn't do more than... Well, if you've ever seen a shit-faced slapper in a short skirt arguing with a bouncer outside of a nightclub, well, it kind of reminded me of that. But Godzilla is finally brought down by Jet Jaguar detonating the orthogonal diagonalizer device and forcing Archetype into its 13th form. Now, with many of the properties of Archetype still unknown, it's highly probable that this isn't the last we've seen of this guy, that he could probably reform, and next time we see him, he could be even better adapted to destroying life on Earth. So what was with the skeleton from the basement? Well, suffice to say, this guy, Professor Michiyuki Ashihara, witnessed a monster rise up from the ocean to destroy his village. This was shortly before the Second World War, so according to the show, the event was largely forgotten, which is kind of outlandish, you know. If a giant lizard came out of the sea, aliens could land, the sun could explode, there ain't nothing short of MIB's memory stick thing that's gonna make you forget this. Anyway, back to the point, Ashihara managed to get the body of the beast and started studying it in the basement of this military facility. And it's not until someone, probably this guy, hooked it up to a power source that it started emitting the radio waves which prompted the appearance of the first Rodan and set this whole thing in motion. So why would Ashihara, who employed this guy, want to prompt this cycle of disaster? Well, the technically correct answer is fuck knows, but that's not the only question I have. Like, what is this guy's evolutionary process exactly? I find it interesting that his evolutions don't seem to have the same pattern each time. For example, from Amphibia to Terrestrius, he does the black crystal cocoon thing, but from Aquatilis to Amphibia, we don't really see anything of the transformation, but it does seem to happen a hell of a lot quicker. Then we don't see a single frame of his transformation from Terrestrius to Ultima, but I'm guessing he didn't use the cocoon method there either. So does he have a different way of evolving each time? For some reason, in my mind, Amphibia crawled out of the dead skin of Aquatilis, kind of like a snake does when it's shedding its skin. I don't know why I think that. And then Terrestrius, its limbs slowly grew as bones crunched and fucking skin ripped, kind of like the Wolfman. I guess we'll never know. So what did I think about these new forms of Godzilla? Well, it's strange, because although I like the fact that he can evolve in itself, I felt like throwing in 3 other versions of the character meant that we didn't get to spend a great amount of time with any of them. And I do catch myself wondering if perhaps they had more drastically differing abilities to one another, maybe each one would have stood out more. But overall, I really think it's just a case of each one not getting enough screen time. But let me know what you think about this. Would you have rather had Godzilla just appear out of the sea as Ultima in the first place? Were the evolutions just an excuse to sell more merch? Personally, I don't think that, as I feel that the evolutions definitely added to the distinctiveness of Singular Point. I'm just not sure how much. If I was going to rank the forms of Godzilla in terms of my favorite creature designs, I think there's no question that Ultima is my favorite. No question. Then Terrestrius, then Aquatilis, then in last, Amphibia, which, only a mother could love, let's face it. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet is in some ways the most important factor about this incarnation of Godzilla, as it's the one thing that sets it apart from every other incarnation of Godzilla that's preceded it. And that's the fact that this incarnation of Godzilla, as well as being a gargantuan force of nature, is also, somehow, a singular point in space and time. Now, I go into this in more detail, or at least I attempt to, in my video called Just What the Hell is a Singular Point Anyway, so check that one out for more detail. But suffice to say that this guy is a being that transcends everything we know about space, time, and matter, and as such, could be one of the most powerful incarnations of Godzilla ever.